What if the shinobi world got a second chance? What if Naruto Uzumaki, the boy who lost everything, was sent back in time with the power to change it all? In a world where every tragedy had already happened once, Naruto returns before the blood is spilled, before the heroes fall, before fate locks its chains. But this time, he's not just stronger, he's wiser, ruthless when needed, and done letting destiny decide his life. With the knowledge of the future, God-level chakra, and bonds that go far beyond love or loyalty, Naruto begins rewriting history itself, uniting villages, saving legends, and standing above the world as the time-traveling Harem King. This is not the story of a Hokage. This is the story of a man who conquered time, fate, and the shinobi world itself. Welcome to Will of Fire Stories. Chapter 1. The Last Seal of the Uzumaki. The sky over the ruins of the Hidden Leaf wasn't blue, it was a bruised purple, choked by the ash of a world that had finally stopped fighting. Naruto Uzumaki, the seventh Hokage, stood atop the splintered remains of the great stone faces. His orange cloak was scorched to a dull brown, and his right arm, the prosthetic built by Tsunade and Katasuke, lay uselessly shattered at his side. Below him, the world was silent. There were no cheers, no crying babies, no bustling markets. There was only the rhythmic, LSING glow of the infinite Tsukuyomi roots, wrapping around the planet like a parasite. Ashiki Otsutsuki had won, but even he was gone now, consumed by the very fruit he had cultivated. Naruto was the last soul left with his ego intact, preserved only by the frantic, burning chakra of Kurama. "It's over, Kit," the fox's voice echoed in his mind. It sounded tired, a sound Naruto never thought he'd hear from a primordial force of nature. "The seal is ready, but you know the price." Naruto looked down at his hands. He held a scroll etched in blood and starlight, a forbidden Uzumaki art recovered from the deepest sub-basement of the Reaper Mask Temple. It was called the Jiken Gyukuden, Sovereign's Restoration. It didn't just send a soul back, it folded reality itself, tethering the user's consciousness to every point in their timeline where their will was strongest. "I'm not just going back to save the village, Kurama," Naruto whispered, his voice cracking. "I'm going back to save them. All of them. Haku, Kimimaro, Neji, Konin, even the ones who thought they were my enemies. I'm going to build a world where nobody has to be a sacrifice." "A king's ambition," Kurama chuckled darkly. "If we do this, the timeline won't just bend, it will shatter. You'll be a focal point. Every woman whose destiny was tied to tragedy will be drawn to your light like moths to a sun. Can you carry that weight?" Naruto's eyes hardened, the cerulean blue shifting into a swirling pattern of the Rinne Sharingan, a gift forcibly taken from the last Otsutsuki. "I've carried a demon since I was a day old. I can carry the world. Let's go." Naruto slammed his palm onto the scroll. The ground didn't shake, it dissolved. The universe screamed as the seventh Hokage tore through the fabric of the fourth great ninja war, the Pain Assault. And the Chunin exams, hurtling backward through a tunnel of golden light. He felt his body shrinking, his massive chakra reserves compressing into a smaller, more volatile vessel. The memories of decades of loss, Hinata's scream as she was struck down, Sakura's final healing jutsu that failed, the sight of Sasuke's cold eyes, burned into his soul, tempering him into something more than a shinobi. Naruto woke up with a gasp. The air was cold and smelled of damp earth and pine needles. He wasn't in the ruins of Konoha. He was in the forest on the outskirts of the Land of Waves. He sat up, clutching his chest. His body was small. He was 12 years old again. He wore the hideous orange jumpsuit, but when he looked into a nearby puddle, his eyes weren't just blue. For a fleeting second, 3 ripples appeared around his pupils before fading back into the mask of a genin. "Naruto, you okay? You've been staring at that tree for 10 minutes. Naruto froze. That voice. He turned slowly to see Sakura Haruno. She looked so young, so untouched by the horrors of the war. Beside her, Sasuke Uchiha sat leaning against a tree, his eyes narrowed in suspicion. "I'm fine, Sakura-chan," Naruto said. His voice sounded strange to his own ears, high-pitched, yet carrying a resonance that made Sakura blink in confusion. He stood up, and for a moment, the sheer gravity of his presence made the birds in the trees go silent. He looked toward the bridge. He knew what was happening. Today was the day Haku and Zabuza would die. Today was the first tragedy he would erase. Kit. Kurama's voice was clear and massive in his head. The chakra flow in this era is thin. If you use the Six Paths power now, you'll level the country. Be subtle. I know, Naruto thought. But I'm not letting Haku die this time. Not for a tool's destiny. As they headed toward the bridge to face the demon of the mist, Naruto felt a new sensation. The sovereign's restoration seal was humming in his soul. He could see the threads of fate, glowing lines connecting him to the people around him. Sakura's thread was a pale pink, flickering with uncertainty. But as he walked past her, his hand accidentally brushing hers, the thread turned a deep, vibrant crimson and thickened. Sakura gasped, her heart suddenly racing. She looked at Naruto's back, feeling an overwhelming sense of security and a strange magnetic pull she had never felt toward him before. It was as if the boy she knew had been replaced by a man who held the keys to the heavens. At the bridge, the mist rolled in. Zabuza appeared, and with him, the masked hunter Nin. Haku, stay back, Naruto, Kakashi yelled, raising his headband to reveal the Sharingan. But Naruto didn't stay back. He stepped forward into the killing frost of Haku's crystal ice mirrors. He didn't pull out a kunai. He didn't make a shadow clone. He simply walked into the center of the mirrors as needles rained down. Why aren't you fighting? Haku's voice echoed from the reflections, filled with sorrow. Because you don't want to kill me, Naruto said, looking directly at the mirror holding the real Haku. And I refuse to let you die for a man who doesn't realize he loves you yet. With a flick of his wrist, Naruto released a microscopic pulse of senjutsu. The ice mirrors didn't shatter. They melted instantly, the chakra within them neutralized. Naruto appeared in front of Haku before the boy could react, catching him by the wrist. The cycle of tools ends today, Naruto declared. Haku looked into Naruto's eyes and saw not a boy, but an ancient, kind king. His heart skipped a beat, and the thread of fate between them snapped into existence, bright, shimmering white. Behind the mist, Naruto sensed Gado's mercenaries approaching. He smiled. The world was about to learn that the seventh Hokage had returned, and he was taking everything back. End of Chapter 1. Chapter 2. The ice melts in the sun. The mist over the great Naruto bridge didn't just dissipate. It was burned away by the sheer intensity of Naruto's presence. Haku stood frozen, his Senbon needles slipping from trembling fingers. He had been raised as a weapon, a cold reflection of Zabuza's will. Yet looking into Naruto's eyes felt like standing before a sun that didn't burn, but instead offered a warmth he hadn't felt since his mother's final embrace. You neutral. Ized the hidden mist jutsu with a single pulse. Zabuza Momochi growled, his massive Kubikiribocho sword trembling in his grip. Even the demon of the mist felt the primal instinct to flee, a cold sweat drenching his bandages. Kakashi Hatake stood paralyzed, his Sharingan spinning wildly as he tried to comprehend what he was seeing. Naruto's chakra wasn't the jagged, boiling red of the 9 tails he had seen during training. It was a calm, golden ocean that seemed to span the entire horizon. Kakashi-sensei, stay back, Naruto commanded. It wasn't the request of a student, it was an order. She found himself subconsciously stepping back, his body obeying before his mind could protest. Naruto turned his gaze back to Haku. The boy in the mask was shaking. You were beautiful, Haku, Naruto said softly, his voice carrying a weight of years of regret. Not because of your face or your bloodline, but because of your loyalty. But that loyalty is being wasted on a lie. Zabuza-sama is my only purpose, Haku whispered. Though the thread of fate Naruto saw connecting them was fraying, while the one connecting Haku to Naruto was glowing with a blinding, iridescent light. Then I'll give you a new purpose, Naruto said. He reached out and gently removed Haku's mask. The delicate features underneath were stained with tears. Naruto wiped one away with his thumb. Live for yourself. And if that's too hard, live for me. I'm going to change this world, and I need a heart as pure as yours to help me do it. Haku's breath hitched. In that moment, the conditioning of a lifetime shattered. The boy, who had always been told he was a tool, felt a profound, soul-deep soul tether snap into place. He didn't just feel seen, he felt claimed. I am yours, Haku whispered, the words carrying the weight of a sacred vow. Hey, what the hell is going on? Zabuza roared, lunging forward with his giant blade. Haku is mine. He's my weapon. Naruto didn't even turn around. He raised 2 fingers. Clang. The massive executioner's blade stopped dead, caught between Naruto's index and middle fingers. The shockwave of the impact cracked the concrete of the bridge beneath Naruto's sandals, but the boy didn't move an inch. Zabuza, Naruto said, his voice dropping into a register that made the air grow heavy. You love him. You're just too much of a coward to admit that the demon has a heart. But today, I'm feeling generous. I'm going to save your life too, so you can watch what he becomes. Before Zabuza could respond, a rhythmic clapping echoed from the far side of the bridge. Gato, the corrupt shipping magnate, appeared with a small army of nearly 300 mercenaries, thugs, ronin, and low-level missing nin. Quite a show. Gato laughed, his cane tapping the ground. But plans have changed. Why pay a demon when I can just kill you all and keep the money? Kill them. Kill everyone on this bridge. The mercenaries charged, a sea of steel and greed. Sakura shrieked, and Sasuke reached for his kunai, his heart hammering against his ribs. Naruto, get out of there. Sasuke yelled, frustrated and terrified by the power his rival was suddenly displaying. Naruto finally let go of Zabuza's sword. He stepped forward, his eyes closing for a brief second. Kurama, give me a drop. Just a drop. Don't overdo it, Kit. You'll crack the tectonic plate. Naruto opened his eyes. They were no longer blue. They were the golden-toed eyes of a perfect sage, rimmed with the crimson slits of the fox. He didn't weave a single hand sign. He simply inhaled. Sage art. Roar of the sovereign. He didn't scream. He let out a low, resonant vibration. A wall of pure kinetic force exploded from his position. It wasn't a wind, it was a physical displacement of reality. The 300D mercenaries didn't even have time to scream. They were swept off the bridge like dust off a table. The water of the ocean beneath them parted in a massive trench, revealing the sea floor for miles before crashing back together in a localized tsunami that swallowed Gato and his men whole. The bridge fell silent. The villagers of the Land of Waves, who had been watching from a distance with pitchforks and hope, fell to their knees. Naruto turned back to his team. Sasuke was staring at him with a mix of awe and absolute horror. Sakura was trembling, her hands over her heart, her eyes wide with a burgeoning, obsessive adoration. But it was Haku who moved first. He knelt at Naruto's feet, bowing his head low. My life, my ice, and my soul belong to you, Naruto-sama. Naruto smiled, a gentle, kingly expression. He reached down and tilted Haku's chin up. Get up, Haku, we have a lot of work to do. This was just the beginning. As Naruto walked toward the edge of the bridge, he looked toward the horizon. He could feel the threads of destiny pulling at him. In the distance, in the hidden rain, Konan was grieving. In the hidden leaf, Hinata was dreaming. In the hidden sand, Tamari was hardening her heart. He would reach them all. He would fix the tragedies before they could even begin. Kakashi-sensei, Naruto called out over his shoulder. Tell the old man I'm bringing back some guests. And tell him, the era of the old shinobi is over. Kakashi couldn't even find his voice to argue. He just watched the blonde boy, no, the blonde sovereign, walk into the morning sun, trailing a wake of shattered destinies and new golden possibilities. End of Chapter 2. Chapter 3. The Crimson Thread of the Sand. The journey back from the Land of Waves was unlike any mission Kakashi Hatake had ever led. Usually, Naruto was a ball of chaotic energy, shouting about ramen and recognition. Now, he walked with a measured, silent grace that commanded the very air around him. Behind him walked Haku, no longer a masked assassin but a silent guardian, his eyes never leaving Naruto's back. Zabuza followed at a distance, surly and silent, his massive sword wrapped in bandages, his pride shattered but his life, miraculously, intact. Sasuke Uchiha was a storm of silent fury. Every time he looked at Naruto, his Sharingan flickered involuntarily. The power he had witnessed on the bridge was beyond anything he had imagined. It wasn't just strength, it was authority. Naruto, Sasuke finally snapped as they crossed into the Fire Country border. What happened to you? That power, That wasn't the Nine Tails. What are you hiding? Naruto stopped. He didn't turn around immediately. He looked at a withered wildflower by the side of the road. He knelt, his hand hovering over the dying petals. A faint, golden glow emanated from his palm, the yang release of the six paths. The flower didn't just bloom, it grew vibrant, its stem thickening, its colors becoming unnaturally vivid. I decided to stop waiting for the world to change, Sasuke. Naruto said, standing up. He finally turned, and the gravity in his eyes made Sasuke flinch. I decided to become the change. You want power to kill your brother. I want power to ensure no brother ever has to kill another again. Our paths are no longer the same. Sakura watched them, her heart thumping painfully. She felt a distance growing between her and Sasuke, the boy she had idolized, while Naruto felt like a magnetic North Pole. She found herself moving closer to Naruto, her hand catching his sleeve. Naruto-kun, you're scaring me a little, she whispered. Naruto's expression softened instantly. He placed a hand on her head, and Sakura felt a rush of warmth, a literal surge of revitalizing chakra, flow through her. Don't be scared, Sakura-chan. I'm building a world where you never have to cry again. I promise. The thread of fate between them, once a thin pink line, began to glow with a gold leaf shimmer. Sakura didn't just love him in that moment. She felt a spiritual tether snap shut. She would follow him into the sun if he asked. Upon their return to Konoha, the village was buzzing. News of the miracle at the bridge had traveled fast via messenger hawk. When the gates opened, the guards were stunned to see the demon of the mist walking peacefully behind a 12-year-old genin. Naruto didn't go to the academy. He didn't go to Ichiraku. He walked straight to the Hokage Tower. Hiruzen Sarutobi, the third Hokage, sat behind his desk, the smoke from his pipe curling into the air. He looked tired, but when Naruto entered the room, the old man sat bolt upright. The boy's presence was like a mountain dropped into a pond. Naruto, Hiruzen said, his voice wary. Kakashi's report was unbelievable. He claims you defeated 300 men with a breath. And you've brought Zabuza Momochi into our walls. The land of waves is now a protectorate of the Uzumaki, Naruto said. He didn't use the word Konoha. Zabuza and Haku are my personal retainers. I've come to tell you that the Chunin exams need to happen exactly as scheduled. But the outcome will be different. Naruto, you're a genin. You can't dictate. Naruto leaned over the desk. For a split second, the room plunged into a terrifying darkness as the Rinne Sharingan manifested in his eyes. The pressure was so immense that the Anbu hidden in the rafters fell unconscious instantly. Old man, Naruto said softly, I know about Danzo. I know about the Uchiha massacre. I know about the threat of the Akatsuki. I am not your weapon anymore. I am the shield of this world. Let the exams proceed. I need to meet the Sand siblings. Hiruzen was sweating. He saw in Naruto not a child, but a god king who had seen the end of time and returned to prevent it. Very well, he whispered. Weeks later, the village was crowded with foreign shinobi. Naruto stood on a rooftop, his eyes scanning the crowds. He felt it, the jagged, bleeding chakra of the Aikibi. In a secluded alleyway, Temari and Kankura were cornered by Konohamaru, but the situation had escalated. Gaara was there, hanging upside down from a tree, his eyes filled with murderous instability. You're a nuisance, Gaara hissed, the sand rising from his gourd. I think I'll kill you all. Gaara, don't, not here, Temari pleaded, her voice trembling. She hated this, the fear she felt for her own brother. Who's going to stop me? Gaara snarled. I am, a voice said. Naruto appeared between Gaara and the children. He didn't move fast, he simply was there. The sand, which usually reacted with lethal speed to protect Gaara, suddenly went limp. It fell to the ground, refusing to obey its master. What did you do to my mother? Gaara gasped, dropping to the ground. For the first time in his life, the sand wasn't responding. Naruto walked up to the boy who was once his greatest mirror of pain. He didn't look with pity, but with understanding. He looked past Gaara, toward the older sister standing behind him. Temari felt Naruto's gaze. It was like a physical weight. She was a warrior, a girl hardened by the harsh winds of the desert, but under Naruto's eyes, she felt her defenses crumbling. The thread of fate appeared, a bold, sunset orange, vibrating with a sudden, intense attraction. Tamari of the Sand, Naruto said. You've spent your whole life being a shield for a brother who doesn't know how to love you. Let me take that burden. Temari's breath hitched. Who are you? Naruto ignored the question and turned back to Gaara. He placed a hand on the boy's forehead, right over the love tattoo. Shukaku. Naruto spoke into the seal. Quiet down. Your king is speaking. Inside Gaara's mind, the titanic one-tailed tanuki let out a whimper and curled into a ball, tear. Refined by the glimpse of the 10 tails chakra within Naruto, the murderous aura around Gaara vanished. The boy collapsed, and Naruto caught him, pulling him into a firm embrace. Tamari ran forward, but she didn't attack. She watched as Naruto healed the mental scars of her brother in seconds, something she had tried to do for years. She looked at Naruto, her face flushing a deep crimson. This boy was an enemy of her village, a target for their invasion, but as he looked up at her and smiled, Tamari knew. The invasion was already over. Not because of a battle, but because her heart had already surrendered. Come, Naruto said, Gaara's head resting on his shoulder. Let's go get some food. We have a world to save, and I can't do it without the hidden sand by my side. End of Chapter 3. Chapter 4. The Snake's Shadow and the Lioness's Heart. The arrival of the Sand siblings had sparked a tension in Konoha that usually preceded a storm, but Naruto walked through the village with a serene confidence that acted as a lightning rod. Following the encounter in the alley, Tamari found herself unable to return to the embassy. She walked 2 paces behind Naruto, her fan strapped to her back, her eyes fixed on the way his golden hair caught the afternoon light. You're quiet, Tamari, Naruto said, not turning back. I don't understand you, she admitted, her voice uncharacteristically soft. Quote, you suppressed the Ikibi like it was a disobedient pet. You treated Gaara like he was actually a person. Why? Naruto stopped at the edge of a training field. Because I know what it's like to have a cage in your soul. And I know what it's like to be looked at with fear instead of love. You've been his keeper, Tamari. I want you to be his sister again. And I want you to be more than just a political pawn for Suna. Tamari felt a flare of heat in her cheeks. In the cutthroat world of the sand, no one spoke of wanting anything for her. She was a weapon, a strategist, a daughter of the cage. But Naruto looked at her as if she were a woman whose happiness actually mattered. The orange thread of fate between them tightened, pulsing with a newfound heat. I have a village to answer to, she whispered. Though her resolve was melting. The village will follow the strong, Naruto replied. And soon, I will be the strongest thing this world has ever seen. The preliminary rounds of the Chunin exams arrived. The tower in the Forest of Death was filled with the elite genin of the 5 nations. But the atmosphere was different this time. The presence of Orochimaru, disguised as a grass ninja, felt like a cold oily slick against Naruto's heightened senses. Naruto stood on the balcony, flanked by Haku and Tamari. Across the room, Hinata Hyuga stood with her team. She was staring at Naruto, her face a mask of confusion and longing. She had noticed the change in him immediately, the way he carried himself, the way the girls from other villages hovered near him like moons orbiting a planet. Naruto caught her eye and winked. Hinata turned a shade of red that rivaled a sunset and nearly fainted, but she felt a surge of confidence she had never known. The thread of fate connecting them was a shimmering lavender, ancient and deep. The matches proceeded with brutal efficiency. When Neji Hyuga stepped into the ring against Hinata, the air grew cold. Neji's bitterness over the branch house was a poison Naruto remembered all too well. Give up, Hinata, Neji sneered, his Byakugan active. Fate has decreed that you are a failure and I am a genius. You cannot change your destiny. Hinata looked up at the balcony. Naruto wasn't shouting encouragement like a loudmouthed brat. He was looking at her with a calm, absolute certainty. Show him, Hinata, Naruto thought, sending a telepathic nudge through their connection. Show him that the gentle fist can be a storm. The fight was a blur. Neji lunged, but Hinata didn't retreat. She moved with a fluidity that shouldn't have been possible for a genin. She bypassed his defense, her palms glowing with a faint blue chakra that Naruto had subtly refined in her during a chance encounter in the woods days prior. With a final strike, she didn't just hit a tenketsu. She emitted a pulse of chakra that knocked Neji back, his world spinning. Destiny, Hinata said, her voice steady for the first time in her life, is what Naruto-kun says it is. The room went silent. Neji looked up in shock, but his eyes didn't land on Hinata. They landed on Naruto, who was now standing in the center of the arena. He hadn't jumped, he had simply appeared. Neji, Naruto said, walking toward the genius of the Hyuga. The bird in the cage can only fly when the cage is gone. Today, I'm breaking the lock. Naruto reached out, before the proctors could intervene. His fingers brushed Neji's forehead protector. The metal snapped like glass, revealing the caged bird seal. Naruto's hand glowed with a terrifying, white-hot light, the seal-breaking art of the Uzumaki sovereignty. Neji screamed as the cursed mark was literally pulled from his skin, dissolved into nothingness by Naruto's touch. The boy collapsed, gasping, looking up at the seal, as if seeing the sky for the first time. You destroyed the seal of the main house. Hiashi Hyuga gasped from the balcony, his face pale with terror and fury. I've destroyed a lot more than that, Hiashi, Naruto said. His voice echoing like thunder. The Hyuga will be whole, or the Hyuga will be nothing. Choose. Before anyone could move, a dark, slithering chakra filled the room. Orochimaru shed his disguise, his long tongue flickering as he hissed in delight. Such power, Naruto-kun. I came for the Uchiha, but you are a masterpiece. I must have your body for my own. Orochimaru lunged, his neck extending with unnatural speed, his fangs bared to deliver the curse mark. Sasuke froze, paralyzed by the Sannin's killing intent. Naruto didn't even blink. He reached out and caught Orochimaru by the throat. The momentum of the Sannin's strike died instantly. The great snake was held aloft like a common garden pest. Orochimaru, Naruto said, his eyes shifting into the cold, calculated ripples of the Rinnegan. You've spent your life chasing immortality. I am immortality. Naruto's grip tightened. A golden aura flared around him, and the screams of the souls Orochimaru had consumed echoed through the hall. With a surgical application of the human path, Naruto didn't kill him. He ripped the malice from Orochimaru's spirit, leaving the Sannin a shivering, weakened wreck on the floor. Go back to your holes, Snake, Naruto commanded. Tell the world that the king has returned. And tell Kabuto if I see him again, there won't be enough of him left to resurrect. Naruto turned back to the crowd. Hinata was there, her eyes shining with tears of joy. Temari was watching with a fierce pride. Sakura was gripped by a devotion that bordered on worship. Naruto smiled, but it was the smile of a conqueror. He walked toward Hinata and pulled her into his side, his other arm reaching out to pull Temari into the fold. The exams are over, Naruto declared to the stunned officials. The unification begins now. Quote, end of Chapter 4. Chapter 5. The rain that washes away the past. The aftermath of Orochimaru's defeat left Konoha in a state of clinical shock. The Sannin, a man who had killed Kage and toppled nations, had been handled like a misbehaving child. But for Naruto, there was no time for celebration. The timeline was shifting, and the ripples were reaching the ears of the Akatsuki. Naruto stood at the village gates, the morning mist clinging to his black and orange cloak. He wasn't alone. Haku stood to his left, the silent frost. Temari stood to his right, her giant fan a testament to the Sand's new unofficial alliance. Hinata, her confidence blooming like a nocturnal flower, stood directly behind him, her Byakugan scanning the horizon. Naruto-kun, Hinata whispered. The village council is demanding your presence. They are terrified of what you did to the Hyuga seal. Let them wait, Hinata, Naruto said, his gaze fixed toward the land of rain. I have promised to keep to a woman who has forgotten how to smile. If I don't go now, the cycle of pain will only tighten. With a single step, the group vanished. This wasn't the body flicker technique, it was a spatial displacement. Naruto was folding the map of the elemental nations. The land of rain was a place of eternal weeping. The towers of Omegakure pierced the gray sky like rusted needles. In the highest spire, Konan, the angel of the Akatsuki, stood by the window. Her heart was a hollow chamber, filled only with the memories of Yahiko and the cold, mechanical directives of Nagato. Suddenly, the air in the center of the room rippled. Konan spun around, her paper wings unfurling instinctively, thousands of lethal sheets ready to shred any intruder. Who enters the domain of God? A friend of the man Nagato used to be. A voice replied. Naruto stepped out of the rift. He looked around the cold, metallic room, his eyes softening as they landed on the woman of paper. In the future he came from. She had died alone in the ocean, her last paper turning red with her blood. Not this time. Naruto Uzumaki, Conan hissed, recognizing the boy from the bingo books. You are the Jinchuriki of the Nine Tails. You've saved us the trouble of finding you. I'm not here for a fight, Conan, Naruto said. He walked forward, ignoring the sharpened paper hovering inches from his throat. I'm he. Rita tell you that Yahiko's dream didn't die with him. You just let it turn into a nightmare. You know nothing of our pain. She cried, her composure breaking for a fraction of a second. I know it all, Naruto said. He reached out, and instead of a weapon, he produced a small, dried flower, one he had recovered from the ruins of their old hideout using his temporal reach. With a pulse of yang chakra, the flower bloomed into a vibrant, living blue. I know about the bridge. I know about Hanzo. And I know that Nagato is rotting in a machine because he thinks pain is the only way to teach the world. Conan froze. The blue flower was a symbol only the three of them knew. Her wings trembled, and she began to descend. Where is he? Naruto asked. He won't see you. He will kill you, she warned, but her hand reached out. Her fingers brushing the thread of fate that Naruto was weaving. As she touched the golden light emanating from him, her gray world suddenly regained its color. The thread was a deep, melancholic violet that began to glow with a silver light. Take me to him. In the shadowed depths of the tallest tower, Nagato sat encased in his life support throne, his body a skeleton of its former self. The Rinnegan eyes staring blankly into the dark. The 6 paths of pain stood like statues around him. You have come to surrender the Kyuubi. Nagato's voice echoed through the mechanical speakers. Hollow and metallic. I've come to give you your legs back, Nagato, Naruto said, walking into the chamber. The 6 paths moved simultaneously, but Naruto simply raised a hand. Shinra Tensai. A wave of repulsive force, 10 times stronger than anything Nagato had ever exerted, slammed the puppets into the walls, pinning them there. Nagato's eyes widened. Those eyes. How do you possess the Diva Path's power? Because I am the bridge between the sage and the world, Naruto said. He walked up to the mechanical throne. He didn't attack. He placed his hands on Nagato's withered shoulders. The cycle of hatred ends here. I am the king of the new era, and I need my brothers and sisters by my side. Naruto unleashed the full power of the 6 paths sage mercy. Golden chakra flooded the room, so bright that Conan had to shield her eyes. The metal rods embedded in Nagato's back began to dissolve. His sunken cheeks filled out, his crimson hair, once white from exhaustion, regained its fiery Uzumaki hue. Nagato gasped, his lungs filling with air that didn't taste like metal and blood. He felt his legs for the first time in a decade. Why? Nagato whispered, looking up at Naruto. Because you are an Uzumaki, Naruto said, helping the man stand. And because she loves you. He looked at Conan. Conan walked forward, her eyes wet with tears. She looked at Nagato, truly Nagato. Not the corpse puppet of pain, and then at Naruto. The silver violet thread between her and Naruto solidified. She didn't see him as a child. She saw him as the savior they had been waiting for since Jiraiya left them in the rain. She stepped toward Naruto and pressed her forehead against his chest, a gesture of absolute surrender and devotion. The rain has finally stopped, she whispered. The Akatsuki is mine now, Naruto declared, his voice carrying to every corner of the tower. Nagato, Conan, we have a world to fix. And we start by bringing down the ones who pull the strings from the moon. As they left the tower, the clouds over Omegakure parted for the first time in years, letting a single beam of golden sunlight hit the water. End of Chapter 5. Chapter 6. The Blood of the Red-Hot Habanero. The sun over Omegakure was a phenomenon the citizens hadn't witnessed in a generation. As Naruto stood on the highest pier, Nagato and Conan at his side, the message was sent across the shinobi world without a single bird leaving the village. The chakra signature Naruto released was a beacon, a golden pillar of light that signaled the end of the Akatsuki as an Agent O. Chaos and its rebirth as the sovereign's vanguard. We have much to undo, Nagato said, his voice now resonant and healthy. He looked at his hands, no longer pale and skeletal. The other members, they are not all like Conan and me. Hidan, Kakuzu, they are monsters. I know, Naruto said, his eyes scanning the horizon. And they will be dealt with. But first, I need to reclaim the heart of the Uzumaki. There is a tragedy hidden in the grass that I will not allow to persist for another second. The land of grass, Conan asked, her violet eyes narrowing. That is a den of scavengers. Exactly, Naruto replied. He turned to Haku and Temari. Prepare the way back to Konoha. I have a detour to make. Hinata, stay with me. I want you to see this. With a flick of his wrist, Naruto tore a rift in space. In a dark, damp infirmary in the hidden grass village, a young girl with crimson hair sat huddled in a corner. Her arms were covered in bite marks, angry, red scars where shinobi had their teeth to drain her life-giving chakra. Karen Uzumaki was 12 years old, and she had already decided that the world was a place of hunger and pain. The door creaked open. Karen flinched, pulling her sleeves down. I can't give any more today. Please, I'll die. You'll never have to give again. A warm, deep voice echoed in the room. Karen looked up. Standing there was a boy who felt like a literal son. His chakra wasn't just large, it was holy. Beside him stood a girl with eyes like pearls, looking at Karen with such profound pity that it made Karen want to cry. Who are you? Karen whispered, her glasses sliding down her nose. Naruto walked forward and knelt in front of her. He didn't wait for permission. He took her scarred arms in his hands. Karen tried to pull away, terrified of the pain. But the moment his skin touched hers, the pain didn't just stop, it vanished. I am Naruto Uzumaki, he said. And you are my kin. I've come to take you home. Naruto's hand glowed with the creation of all things. The bite marks on Karen's arms began to fade, the skin becoming unblemished and smooth. The trauma etched into her nervous system was washed away by a wave of pure, golden euphoria. Karen gasped, her heart racing. She had a sensory ability that allowed her to smell chakra, and Naruto smelled like summer rain in ancient forests. It was intoxicating. The thread of fate between them, a bright, jagged red, snapped into a thick, unbreakable cable. She didn't just feel safe. She felt an obsessive, overwhelming need to never let go of him. You're like me, she sobbed, throwing herself into his arms. I'm more than that, Karen, Naruto whispered, stroking her red hair. I'm the one who's going to make sure no Uzumaki ever suffers again. The door to the infirmary burst open. 5 grass shinobi stood there, their faces twisted in greed. Hey, that girl is village property. Step away from. Naruto didn't even look at them. He didn't use a jutsu. He simply released a fraction of his killing intent. The air in the room became as heavy as lead. The grass shinobi didn't just stop. Their hearts simply ceased beating from the sheer terror of being in the presence of a predator that shouldn't exist. They collapsed in a heap. Naruto stood up, lifting Karen in his arms. He looked at Hinata. Is she okay? Hinata nodded, her Byakugan deactivated. She walked over and placed a hand on Karen's shoulder. We are your family now, Karen-chan. Naruto-kun is building a place for all of us. Karen looked at Hinata, then back at Naruto. She saw the threads of fate. The girls already gathered around him, and instead of jealousy, she felt a fierce, burning loyalty. She was the blood of the Uzumaki, and she would be his most devoted follower. They returned to the gates of Konoha not as genin, but as a procession of legends. Naruto walked in the center. To his right was Conan, the angel of rain. To his left was Temari of the sand. Behind him walked Haku, Hinata, and Karen, who clung to his cloak like a lifeline. The Konoha elders, including Danzo Shimura and the advisors Kaharu and Homura, were waiting at the entrance, flanked by dozens of Anbu. Naruto Uzumaki, Danzo shouted, his one visible eye narrowed. You have deserted your post, made illegal alliances with enemy villages, and brought high-ranking criminals into our walls. You are under arrest for treason. Naruto stopped. He let out a low, amused chuckle that sent shivers down the spines of every ninja present. He stepped forward, and with every step, the ground beneath him turned into a mosaic of golden seals. Danzo, Naruto said, his voice echoing with the power of the sage. I was wondering when you'd show your face. I've seen the future where you ruin this village. I've seen the bodies you've piled up in the name of Root. Seize him, Danzo commanded. The Anbu moved, but they were stopped by a wall of paper and a blast of wind. Konan and Temari stood ready, their eyes cold. Don't, Naruto said to his companions. This is a king's business. Naruto looked at Danzo, and his eyes shifted. The Rinne Sharingan spun. You want to talk about treason? Let's talk about the Uchiha. Let's talk about Shisui's eye. Quote. Before Danzo could blink, Naruto was in front of him. He reached out and tore the bandages from Danzo's arm, revealing the horrific sight of the embedded Sharingan eyes. A collective gasp went up from the gathered Konoha shinobi. This man is the rod in the leaf, Naruto declared. With a single motion, Naruto slammed his hand into Danzo's chest. He didn't kill him. He used the soul extraction path to pull the very essence of Danzo's malice out of his body. The stolen eyes on Danzo's arm withered and turned to dust, their energy returning to the world. Danzo fell to his knees. A hollow shell of a man, his mind broken by the weight of his own sins being forced back upon him. Naruto turned to the village. I am not a weapon of the leaf. I am the sovereign of the 5 nations. Those who wish for a world without war, follow me. Those who stand in the way, will be forgotten by history. The shinobi of Konoha, the Jonin, the Chunin, even the civilians, looked at the boy they once called a monster. They saw the women from 4 different lands standing by him, ready to die for him. They saw the power he wielded. One by one, the Anbu lowered their blades. They knelt. Karen gripped Naruto's hand, her red hair glowing in the sun. Where to next, Naruto-kun? Naruto looked toward the land of lightning. There's a cat and a bee that need to be brought into the fold. And a certain 2-tailed priestess who shouldn't have to die in a ritual. End of Chapter 6. Chapter 7. The Blue Fire of the Cloud. The atmosphere in Kumogakure was as volatile as the lightning that struck its peaks. High in the mountains of the land of lightning, the 4th Raikage, slammed his fist onto his desk, shattering the reinforced stone. He did what? The Raikage roared. Naruto Uzumaki has taken control of the hidden rain, formed a pact with the sand, and effectively neutralized the Konoha Council, Mabui reported, her voice trembling. And he is heading here. Reports say he travels with a personal guard of the world's most dangerous women. He thinks he can just walk into my domain and demand my Jinchuriki. Snarled, his body crackling with lightning-style chakra mode. I'll bury that brat before he crosses the border. Naruto didn't cross the border like an invader, he arrived like a storm front. He stood on a high plateau overlooking the Unraikyo storm cloud gorge. Beside him stood Konan, her paper wings shimmering with a metallic sheen, and Karen, whose sensory abilities had expanded 100-fold under Naruto's tutelage. I feel them, Karen said, pointing toward the deep canyons. 2 massive signatures. One is wild and rhythmic, that's the 8 tails. The other is cold, blue, and flickering. That must be the 2 tails. Yugito ni, Naruto murmured. In his past, she had been hunted down by the Akatsuki, her body displayed as a trophy after her biju was ripped out. He wouldn't allow it. Konan, keep the Raikage's scouts at bay. Don't hurt them unless you have to. I'm going to talk to the cats. With a flicker of golden light, Naruto vanished. He reappeared in a secluded training ground where a woman with long, blonde hair tied in a thick braid was practicing her fire release. Yugito ni spun around, her fingernails extending into glowing blue claws. A leaf shinobi. You've got a lot of nerve coming here alone, she hissed, her eyes slanting like a feline's. I'm not here as a shinobi of the leaf, Yugito, Naruto said. He didn't take a fighting stance. He simply walked toward her. I'm here because the Akatsuki were supposed to kill you in 3 years. I'm here to make sure that never happens. The Akatsuki? What are you talking about? She lunged, a blur of blue flames. Naruto didn't dodge. He raised his hand, and the flames didn't burn him. They swirled around his palm, tamed by his innate mastery of the elements. He caught her wrist, and the blue fire of the Matabi flickered and died. Matabi, Naruto spoke, his voice echoing into the subconscious of the 2 tails. You remember the sage of the 6 paths. You remember the promise of the one who would lead you home. Within Yugito's mind, the giant flaming cat stopped its thrashing. It stared at the golden avatar of Naruto appearing in its cage. The boy with the sun in his soul, the cat whispered. You have the chakra of all my siblings. Yugi. To froze as a wave of peace washed over her. For years, she had struggled to maintain her humanity while being a vessel for a monster. Now, for the first time, the monster was purring. Naruto looked into Yugito's eyes. The Raikage treats you like a weapon. I want to treat you like a queen. Join me, and we will rewrite the destiny of the Jinchuriki. The thread of fate between them, a brilliant, flickering cobalt, materialized and wrapped around them both. Yugito's breath hitched. She felt a connection that transcended village loyalty. She saw a man who didn't fear her power, but cherished it. Why should I trust you? She whispered, though her claws had retracted. Because I've already saved your life in a future you'll never have to see, Naruto said. He leaned in, his lips brushing her forehead, right where the seal was located. A surge of golden yang chakra entered her, stabilizing the Matabi and granting Yugito perfect control. She gasped, her face flushing as the overwhelming warmth of Naruto's presence filled her. I am yours, Yugito whispered, her pride as a kunoichi bowing before the king. Hey, what are you doing to my teammate, ya fool, ya damn fool? A massive figure landed nearby. Killer Bee, the Jinchuriki of the 8 tails, stood with his 7 swords drawn. But even as he tried to rhyme, his voice faltered. The Hachibi inside him was screaming in terror. Bee, don't move. Gyuki's voice roared in Bee's head. That's him. That's the sovereign. If you draw a blade against him, the world ends. Yo, Hachibi is shaking in his boots. This kid is more than he looks, ooh. Bee stuttered, lowering his blades. Bee, Naruto said, smiling. I'm not here to fight. I'm here to invite you and your brother to the new world. But first, I think the Raikage needs a lesson in humility. The sky above them darkened. A bolt of lightning crashed down, and the Raikage appeared, his fist aimed directly at Naruto's head. Get away from my brother. Naruto didn't even move his feet. He caught the Raikage's lariat with one hand. The impact sent a shockwave that leveled the surrounding trees, but Naruto didn't budge. Raikage, Naruto said, his eyes glowing with the Rinnegan. Your speed is impressive, but you're moving in a pace that I've already outrun. With a gentle shove, Naruto sent the mountain of a man flying back 50 feet. The Raikage landed on his feet, panting, his eyes wide with disbelief. No one had ever stopped his top speed charge so effortlessly. I am forming a union of nations, Naruto declared, his voice carrying through the canyon. Kumo can be the pillar of our military. Or it can be a relic of a dead era. Yugito and Bee have already chosen. What about you? Yugito stepped to Naruto's side, her blue chakra flaring with a new, refined elegance. Sama, he is what we've been waiting for. The cycle of the Biju ends with him. The Raikage looked at his daughter, figure, Yugito, and his brother, Bee. He saw the way Yugito looked at Naruto, with a devotion that was almost spiritual. He looked at Naruto, a boy who possessed the power of a god but the eyes of a savior. The Raikage powered down his lightning cloak. If you can protect them better than I can, then show me this new world, Uzumaki. Naruto smiled and reached out, pulling Yugito closer to his side. She leaned into him, her blue fire Dazerme burning only for him. One more village to go, Naruto said, looking toward the hidden mist. And a Mizukage who needs to be freed from a puppet master's strings. End of Chapter 7. Chapter 8. The Crimson Mist's Redemption. The Hidden Mist Village, Kurigakure, was a place of jagged cliffs and a perpetual, suffocating fog that tasted of salt and old blood. For years, it had been known as the Bloody Mist, a reputation RNED through graduation rituals where students murdered their own kin. But even though the ritual had ended, the village was dying from within. Naruto stood on the bow of a small wooden ship as it cut through the thick veil of the harbor. He was flanked by his growing vanguard, Konan, whose paper wings fluttered against the damp air, Haku, who looked at his homeland with a mixture of grief and resolve, and Yugito Ni, whose blue flame aura provided the only light in the gloom. The air here is heavy, Yugito noted, her hand resting on the hilt of a dagger Naruto had gifted her. It feels like the village is holding its breath. It is, Haku whispered. The Mizukage hasn't been herself for years. The people whisper of a curse. Naruto narrowed his eyes. Through the fog, he could see the threads of fate of the village. They were tangled, gray, and knotted around a central point of darkness. He knew the truth. Yagura Karataki, the fourth Mizukage and Jinchuriki of the Three Tails, was being controlled by Obito Uchiha's genjutsu. Karen, find him, Naruto commanded. Karen, standing at the stern, closed her eyes and performed the mind's eye of the Kagura. Her brow furrowed. I've got him. Deep in the central tower. But Naruto-kun, his chakra is cold. It's like there's a snake coiled around his brain. That's the puppet master, Naruto said. Let's go. They didn't sneak into the Mizukage's tower. Naruto walked through the front gates. When the mist guards lunged at them with their serrated blades, Naruto didn't even draw a weapon. He simply released a pulse of Konkero. Ars Haki, a refined application of his spiritual energy. The guards slumped to the ground, unconscious before they hit the floor. As they reached the throne room, the temperature plummeted. Mei Terumi, the future Mizukage, stood in their path. She was beautiful, her long auburn hair cascading over her shoulders, but her eyes were filled with the weariness of a woman watching her home rot. You've come far, Leaf Boy, Mei said, her hands forming the signs for her lava release. But we've had enough of outsiders interfering in our business. Mei Terumi, Naruto said, his voice echoing in the hollow hall. You've been planning a coup for 3 years. You know your cage is a puppet, but you're afraid that killing him will lose the Three Tails forever. I'm not here to interfere. I'm here to finish what you started. Mei froze. How could you possibly know my plans? I know everything, Naruto said. He walked toward her, and as he entered her personal space, the thread of fate between them sparked into existence. It was a lush, vibrant emerald green, shimmering with a sudden, overwhelming attraction. Mei's heart skipped. She was a woman who valued strength and maturity, and the boy standing before her radiated an ancient, sovereign power that made her knees feel weak. The lava she had been preparing dissolved back into harmless steam. Move aside, Mei, Naruto said softly, his hand brushing her shoulder. Let me show you the truth. Mei found herself stepping back, her eyes wide as she watched Naruto kick open the doors to the inner sanctum. Inside, the fourth Mizukage, Yagura, sat on a throne of coral. His eyes were vacant, his pupils fixed in a three-tomo pattern. Behind him, a masked figure, Obito, under the guise of Madara, stood in the shadows. So, the masked man hissed. The brat who broke the timeline finally arrives. You're a glitch in the system, Naruto Uzumaki. I'm the system's update, Obito, Naruto replied. Obito didn't wait. He used Kamui to warp toward Naruto, his hand reaching out to pull the Jinchuriki into the pocket dimension. But Naruto didn't dodge. He reached out and grabbed the space where Obito was supposed to be intangible. With a surge of 6 paths chakra, Naruto forced Obito's body back into the physical plane. He caught the masked man by the throat and slammed him against the wall. You're too slow, Naruto whispered. With his other hand, Naruto pointed at Yagura. Sage art. Eye of Revelation. A beam of pure white light shot from Naruto's finger, striking the Mizukage's forehead. The genjutsu didn't just break, it shattered with the sound of breaking glass. Yagura gasped, his eyes clearing as the Three Tails, Isobu, roared in relief within him. The puppet strings were cut. Obito snarled, his mask cracking under the pressure of Naruto's grip. You think this changes anything? The plan is already in motion. The plan died the moment I woke up, Naruto said. He channeled a burst of golden chakra into Obito's body, causing the Uchiha to scream as his Zetsu-infused half began to burn. Obito used a desperate Kamui to retreat, vanishing into the void, leaving behind only a trail of black smoke. Naruto turned to the room. Yagura had collapsed, and Mei Terumi was staring at Naruto as if he were a god. He's free, Mei whispered, falling to her knees. She looked at Naruto, her face flushing with an intensity she had never felt. The emerald thread between them thickened into a heavy cord. You saved us. You saved my village. Naruto walked over to her and offered his hand. The bloody mist is over, Mei. From today, Kurigakure joins the sovereignty. And I want you to lead it, by my side. Mei took his hand, her fingers trembling. She didn't just see a leader, she saw the man who had answered her every prayer. She stood up and, in front of the gathered mist shinobi, she leaned in and kissed Naruto on the cheek, a claim of her own. "I am yours, Naruto Uzumaki," Mei declared, her voice ringing with a new authority. "And the mist follows its king." Quote, Naruto smiled, looking at the women gathered around him, Konan, Yugito, Mei, Karen, Haku, and Tamari. The circle was almost complete. The tragedies were being erased, one by one. "Now," Naruto said, his gaze shifting toward the stars, "it's time to deal with the moon." End of Chapter 8. Chapter 9. The Princess of the Pale Moon. With the major shinobi villages bound by blood and vow to his sovereignty, Naruto turned his gaze upward. The world was relatively safe, but he knew the greatest tragedy was yet to come, not from the earth, but from the lineage of the stars. In the future that was, Tonari Otsutsuki would attempt to drop the moon on the planet, kidnapping Hanabi Hyuga to awaken the Tenseigan. Naruto stood atop the Hokage rock, his presence casting a long shadow over a peaceful Konoha. Beside him stood Hinata, her Byakugan active, her hand entwined with his. Behind them stood his vanguard, Mei, Yugito, Konan, and Tamari, each representing a pillar of the new world. "They are coming, aren't they?" Hinata whispered. She felt the disturbance in the atmospheric chakra, a cold, alien pressure. "He's coming for you, Hinata," Naruto said, his voice a low rumble. "But I've already rewritten that chapter." Suddenly, the sky tore open. A rift of white energy manifested, and a fleet of automated puppet warriors descended like falling stars. In the center of the swarm floated Tonari Otsutsuki, his eyes closed, his silver hair flowing in the cosmic wind. "I have come for the Byakugan princess," Tonari's voice echoed, cold and devoid of emotion. Fulfill the decree of Hamura and cleanse this failed world." "You're a bit late, Tonari," Naruto called out. He didn't jump, he ascended. He walked into the air as if on invisible stairs, his golden cloak flaring out like wings. Tonari's brow furrowed. "A human who can walk on the heavens. It matters not. Give me the girl, and the moon's descent will be swift and merciful." "I'm not giving you anything," Naruto said. "In fact, I'm taking back the eyes you think you're entitled to." Tonari gestured, and a wave of green energy orbs, the Kinrin reincarnation explosion, streaked toward Naruto. Naruto didn't even raise his hands. The orbs hit an invisible barrier of 6 paths chakra and dissolved into harmless sparks. Naruto moved in a flash of yellow. He appeared behind Tonari, his hand glowing with the creation of all things. He didn't strike to kill, he struck to sever. He tapped the pressure points on Tonari's shoulders, sealing the Otsutsuki's connection to the Tenseigan altar on the moon. "Your tragedy was loneliness, Tonari," Naruto said, his voice softening. "Living in a tomb for 1,000 years. But you don't get to destroy my world because you're sad." Naruto reached into the rift Tonari had created and pulled. Using his spatial mastery, he didn't just go to the moon, he brought the moon's core to him. A massive, glowing orb of golden eyes, the Tenseigan, materialized above Konoha. The village looked up in awe as Naruto shattered the orb. Instead of a catastrophic explosion, a rain of pure, rejuvenating chakra fell over the world. Every Hyuga in Konoha felt their Byakugan evolve. The caged bird, seals of the past feeling like distant memories. Tonari fell from the sky, his power stripped, crashing onto the training grounds. Naruto descended, landing softly beside him. But Naruto wasn't looking at Tonari. He was looking at the woman who stepped out of the moon rift behind them. This was the tragedy he truly intended to fix. Kagaya Otsutsuki. No, it was a woman who looked like her, but with eyes full of a sorrow that predated the shinobi world. It was a remnant of Kagaya's original soul, the one that loved the earth before the god tree's fruit corrupted her. "The cycle has been broken," the apparition whispered. Naruto walked toward the shimmering figure. He reached out and touched her cheek. With the sovereign's restoration, he poured the gathered love and peace of the new era into the remnant. "You don't have to be the mother of demons anymore," Naruto said. "You can just be a mother." The apparition solidified. The horns receded, the third eye closed, and she became a woman of ethereal beauty, Kagaya, restored to her state before the madness. The thread of fate that connected her to the planet, and to Naruto, was a blinding, cosmic white. Kagaya fell into Naruto's arms, weeping for the first time in millennia. She wasn't a goddess to be feared, but a queen who had found her king. The women of the vanguard approached. There was no jealousy, only a profound sense of completion. Hinata stepped forward and took Kagaya's hand. The two princesses of the Byakugan finally united. The moon will remain in the sky as a lantern, not a weapon, Naruto declared, his voice carrying to the ends of the earth. Tonari looked up, seeing the warmth he had never known. He bowed his head. I was blind, not in my eyes, but in my soul. Stand up, Tonari, Naruto said. You have a moon to look after. But today, we celebrate. The last threat from the stars has been turned into an ally. As the sun set, the moon rose, brighter and more beautiful than ever before. Naruto stood in the center of the village, surrounded by the most powerful and beautiful women of the age, each representing a piece of the world he had saved. He had traveled back to fix tragedies, and in doing so, he had built a kingdom of peace. But as he looked into the distance, he knew there was one final task. The source of all chakra had been redeemed, but the man who had started it all, Madara Uchiha, was still waiting in the shadows of the past. One final move, Naruto whispered, his Rinne Sharingan spinning with the light of 1,000 stars. End of Chapter 9. Chapter 10. The Ghost of the Uchiha. The world had become a tapestry of Naruto's design, but a single thread remained frayed and dangerous. Deep within the mountains of the graveyard, in a cavern where the air felt like cold oil, an ancient man sat tethered to the Gedo Mazo. Madara Uchiha, his skin like cracked parchment and his eyes blind, felt the shift in the world's chakra. The plan is unraveling, Madara rasped, his voice a ghost's whisper. Obito has failed. The Jinchuriki has become something impossible. White Zetsu emerged from the ground, his usual playful demeanor gone. Madara-sama, it's worse than that. The Jinchuriki has neutralized the Otsutsuki on the moon. He has unified the 5 nations. He isn't just a boy, he's the sage reborn, and he's coming here. Then let him come, Madara said, a predatory smile stretching his withered lips. I am the Uchiha's true shadow. Even a god can be bled. Naruto arrived at the mountain range not with an army, but with a family. Beside him stood Kagaya, her presence now serene and calming, Meiterumi, the mist's fire, and Hinata, the silent strength of the leaf. He's inside, Kagaya said, her pale eyes sensing the twisted chakra of the statue. The man who wished to be me. He is pathetic, yet his will is a poison. I'll handle this, Naruto said. He looked at his companions. Stay here. If Obito tries to return, stop him. But Madara needs to see the sun one last time. Naruto walked into the darkness of the cavern. He didn't use a torch. His own body emitted a soft, golden radiance that pushed back the shadows. As he reached the inner chamber, he saw the titanic husk of the Gedo Mazo and the frail old man sitting before it. Naruto Uzumaki, Madara greeted, not turning his head. You have destroyed the peace I worked decades to create. You bring a false light to a world that deserves only the dream. Your dream was a coffin, Madara, Naruto replied, stopping 10 feet away. You wanted to save the world by putting it to sleep. I'm saving it by waking it up. Words of a child, Madara hissed. Even with your stolen power, you cannot understand the depth of human hatred. It is a flame that cannot be extinguished. Then I'll give it a new fuel, Naruto said. Naruto didn't attack. He stepped forward and placed his hand on the Gedo Mazo. The massive statue let out a groan that shook the mountainside. Naruto wasn't feeding it chakra. He was rewriting its purpose. Using the 6 paths. Sovereign's rebirth, Naruto funneled the pure, untainted energy he had recovered from Kagaya back into the husk. The statue didn't transform into the 10 tails. Instead, it began to shrink, its wood-like skin turning into white flower petals. The malice of the Biju was being purged, replaced by the essence of life itself. Madara felt the lifelines connected to his back begin to glow. What are you doing? You're destroying the vessel. I'm giving you a choice, Madara, Naruto said. You can die here as a bitter shadow. Or you can see the world you tried to burn. I'm giving you back your prime, but I'm taking your eyes. You won't need the Rinnegan to see the truth. Naruto unleashed a torrent of yang energy. The cavern was filled with a light so intense that even the stones seemed to weep. Madara's withered body began to change. His hair turned from white to a deep, lustrous black. His skin smoothed, and his muscles filled out. Within seconds, the legendary Madara Uchiha stood in his physical prime, the warrior who had once challenged the world. But when he opened his eyes, they were just eyes, dark, human, and clear. The Rinnegan was gone, absorbed into Naruto's own sovereign reserves. Madara lunged at Naruto, his fist crackling with pure physical force. Naruto caught the blow with a single palm. He impacted, creating a crater beneath them. You took my vision, Madara roared. I gave you your life, Naruto countered. Look around you, Madara. Naruto used his spatial mastery to transport them both to the peak of the mountain. Below them, the world was spread out in a vista of gold and green. They could see the lights of the hidden leaf and the hidden sand, not as rivals, but as a single, glowing network of peace. Madara stood frozen. He saw no war. He saw no hate. He saw a world where the name, Uchiha, wasn't a curse, but a part of a greater whole. He saw the women Naruto had brought Tog, Ether, representatives of every tragedy he had intended to exploit, standing as a united front. It's impossible, Madara whispered, his knees buckling. No one man can hold this much together. I don't hold it alone, Naruto said, gesturing to the women who had followed him to the peak. I hold it because they chose to believe in me. And because I chose to believe in them. Mei Terumi stepped forward, her eyes soft as she looked at the legendary ancestor of the Uchiha. The war you wanted is over, Madara. There is no more need for ghosts. Madara looked at Naruto, then at the horizon. The fire in his soul, once a destructive blaze, flickered and died, leaving behind only the cold ash of realization. He had spent his entire life running toward a mirage, while Naruto had built an oasis. You are not the sage, Madara said, his voice finally breaking. You are something the sage never dared to be. You are a king. Madara sat on the edge of the cliff, watching the sun rise over a world he no longer recognized. He was no longer a threat, he was a relic. Naruto turned to his vanguard. The last major tragedy had been neutralized. The past was settled. Now, Naruto said, taking Hinata's hand on one side and Kagaya's on the other. We build the future, not just for us, but for everyone who ever lost someone to the dark. As they walked down the mountain, the threads of fate, and Naruto didn't just connect to the women, they wove into the very earth itself, a golden net that would ensure the tragedies of the past would never return. End of Chapter 10. Chapter 11. The Serpent's Final Skin. The global unification was nearly complete, but the shadows of the old world had one final, desperate refuge. Deep within the hidden laboratories of the Ruchi Cave, the last remnants of the snake's wool were festering. Kabuto Yakushi, having escaped the purge of Orochimaru's main hideouts, had ascended to a terrifying new form. He had fused the DNA of the Sound Five, the Taka members, and the discarded cells of the Sannin into a singular, unstable monstrosity. Naruto stood in the center of the Leaf's new Great Hall, a structure made of white stone and living wood. Beside him sat a council of queens, Mei of the Mist, Temari of the Sand, and Konan of the Rain. Kagaya sat at the head of the table, her presence acting as a cosmic anchor for the room. Kabuto is no longer human, Karen reported, her brow sweating as she concentrated. He's tapped into the dragon pulse of the Ruchi Cave. He's attempting to cast a mass Edo Tensei, not to bring back heroes, but to revive ever. Why nameless casualty of the great wars as an army of mindless hunger? He wants to drown my world in the ghosts of the past, Naruto said, his voice cold. I won't allow the dead to be desecrated any longer. I will go with you, Kagaya said, her voice like silk over stone. The white snake was always a scavenger of my lineage. It is time he was purged. The Ruchi Cave was a labyrinth of wet stone and the smell of sulfur. As Naruto and Kagaya entered, the walls themselves seemed to breathe. Thousands of snakes hissed from the crevices, their eyes glowing with a sickly purple light. Naruto Uzumaki, Kabuto's voice echoed from every direction, distorted by his draconic transformation. You think you've fixed everything. You've only created a bigger target. Without the cycle of hatred, the world has no drive. I will bring back the struggle. A massive white snake, thick as a tower, lunged from the darkness. Its head split open to reveal Kabuto's torso, his skin covered in jagged scales and horns. Kagaya stepped forward, her hair flowing upward as if gravity had ceased to exist. 80 Gods vacuum attack. With a flick of her hand, a barrage of invisible chakra fists slammed into the serpent, pulverizing the stone walls and sending Kabuto crashing into the depths of the cavern. Naruto didn't wait. He activated the Six Paths Sage mode, but he didn't use it for destruction. He slammed his palms into the floor of the cave. This earth does not belong to the dead, Naruto declared. Sage art. Restoration of the Pure Land. A golden wave of chakra surged through the cave system. This was the ultimate counter-jutsu to the Edo Tensei. Instead of binding souls to the earth, Naruto was reinforcing the veil between the worlds. Across the continent, the coffins Kabuto had prepared began to crumble into dust. The souls within were not snatched away, they were gently released, their regrets washed away by Naruto's warmth. Kabuto screamed as the DNA he had stolen began to reject him. Without the hate of the deceased to fuel his sage transformation, his body began to revert. No, the power of the white snake is eternal. Kabuto shrieked, his form shrinking. Naruto walked out the settling dust and stood over the shaking, pathetic figure of the man who wanted to be a mastermind. Naruto didn't kill him. He looked at Kabuto with a gaze that saw every trauma, every moment of being a nameless orphan with no identity. You spent your life trying to be everyone else because you were afraid of being no one, Naruto said. He reached down and touched Kabuto's head. With the human path, Naruto didn't rip out the soul, he restored the memory of the one person who had truly loved him. A vision of Nono Yakushi, the mother of the orphanage, filled Kabuto's mind. The bitterness, the scales, and the poison melted away. Kabuto collapsed, weeping, his glasses cracked on the floor. Go back to the orphanage, Kabuto, Naruto said. Use your knowledge to heal, or don't use it at all. But the snake is dead. As they exited the cave, the sun was hitting the entrance. Kagaya looked at Naruto, a strange, new emotion in her eyes. You do not just defeat enemies, Naruto. You erase the reason for their existence. That's what a king does, Naruto replied. He turned to the horizon. The vanguard was waiting for him. The threads of fate were now so numerous and strong that He formed a golden canopy over the land. But Naruto knew that while the world was fixed, he had one final duty to the women who had given him their hearts. It's time, Naruto said to the air. For what, Naruto-kun? Hinata asked as she met him at the base of the mountain. For the coronation, Naruto said, a brilliant smile breaking across his face. And the wedding that will unite the 5 nations forever. End of Chapter 11. Chapter 12. The coronation of the sun and moon. The world had reached a state of equilibrium that the elemental nations had not known since the time of the Sage of the Six Paths. The reconstruction of the Hidden Leaf was complete, but it was no longer just a village of the Fire Country. It had become the capital of the Sovereign Union. At the center of the village stood a new palace. A breathtaking fusion of Uzumaki architecture and the ethereal aesthetics of the moon. Today was the day of the great unification. Naruto stood before a floor-to-ceiling mirror, dress, set in royal robes of deep black and shimmering gold. Over his shoulders sat a cloak that changed color with the light, shifting from the orange of a sunrise to the white of a full moon. His Rinne Sharingan was calm, reflecting a soul that had finally found peace after a lifetime of war and a journey through time. You look like a proper king, Kit, Kurama's voice rumbled, no longer a growl but a proud resonance. Though I never thought I'd see the day you traded ramen for a crown. I'm not just wearing it for me, Kurama, Naruto replied, adjusting the high collar. I'm wearing it for everyone who didn't make it to this timeline. A soft knock came at the door. It wasn't a guard, it was Hinata. She entered, and even Naruto, who had seen the wonders of the cosmos, found his breath hitching. She wore a kimono of pale lavender silk, embroidered with silver threads that mimicked the constellations. Her confidence was no longer a flicker, but a steady flame. The representatives have arrived, Naruto-kun, she said, her voice melodic. The Raikage, the Tsuchikage, and the people of the mist and sand are filling the plaza. They are waiting for their sovereign. Naruto walked to her and took her hands. The thread of fate Between them was no longer a line, but a bridge. Are you ready, Hinata? Once we step out there, the world changes forever. I've been ready since the day you saved me from the bullies in the snow. She whispered, leaning into him. The balcony of the sovereign palace overlooked a sea of thousands. Every shinobi headband had been replaced by a new symbol, a swirl intertwined with a lotus, representing the union. As Naruto stepped into the light, the roar of the crowd was like a physical wave. But it wasn't just the cheers of men that filled the air. To his left and right, the women who had helped him reshape reality took their places. Temari stood tall, representing the strength of the desert. Mei Terumi smiled, her presence radiating the elegance of the sea. Yugito Ni stood with the pride of the lightning peaks. Konan, her paper wings shimmering like diamonds in the sun, looked over the crowd with the grace of a guardian angel. Karen stood nearby, her red hair glowing, her sensory heart full. And finally, Kagaya Otsutsuki herself, standing as the matriarch of the new era, her ancient eyes softened by the humanity Naruto had restored to her. Naruto raised his hand, and the silence that followed was absolute. For generations, we have defined ourselves by our borders, Naruto's voice echoed, carried by the wind itself. We have defined ourselves by our losses, our grudges, and the blood we spilled to protect pieces of earth. But today, the earth is one. Today, we do not fight for a village. We live for the world. He reached out, and from his palm, a golden seed of chakra floated into the sky. It expanded, shattering into millions of tiny lights that settled over every person in the crowd. It was a blessing of the yang release, a gift of vitality and health to every soul present. I am Naruto Uzumaki, he declared. I have seen the end of the world, and I have returned to ensure it never comes. I do not ask for your worship. I ask for your hand in building a future where no child ever has to know the weight of a kunai. Gaara, standing in the front row as the cage, was the first to kneel. He was followed by the Raikage, then Onoki, then the thousands of shinobi behind them. It wasn't a surrender to a conqueror, it was an oath to a king who had proven his love for them all. As the sun reached its zenith, Naruto turned to the women beside him. In this new world, he would not choose just one, he would lead with all of them. They were the pillars of his kingdom, the queens of the new era. He took Hinata's hand and Mei's hand, drawing them close. The Harem King was a title the world would whisper in hushed, admiring tones, but to Naruto, it was simply his family, the hearts he had saved from tragedy. Let the festival begin, Naruto laughed, the sound carrying the joy of a man who had finally won. The sky was filled with paper butterflies and blue flames, while the desert winds brought the scent of cactus flowers. The tragedies were gone. The king had arrived. End of Chapter 12. Chapter 13. The Garden of Rebirth. The coronation had passed, and the world had settled into a peace so profound it felt like a dream. The borders were open. The hidden villages had become centers of trade and learning, and the threat of the Otsutsuki felt like a fading nightmare. But for Naruto, the sovereign of the Union, the work of a king was never truly finished. There were still echoes of the old world that needed to be integrated into the light. Naruto sat in the private gardens of the sovereign palace, a sanctuary of lush greenery and floating water orbs. He was not alone. Around him, the women who formed the heart of his new world were gathered in a rare moment of repose. Mei Terumi sat on a stone bench, her head resting on Naruto's shoulder, a cup of tea in her hand. Across from them, Temari and Yugito were engaged in a friendly sparring match, their movements blurred and graceful, while Hinata and Karen sat by the pond, teaching the younger generation of Uzumaki and Hyuga children how to mold chakra into the shape of flowers. You're thinking again, Naruto, Mei whispered, her thumb tracing the pattern on his sleeve. I can feel your chakra humming. The world is at peace. What is left to worry about? It's not worry, Mei, Naruto said, looking up at the sky where the moon, now a lush, green world then, KS to his and Kagaya's efforts, hung visible even in daylight. It's responsibility. I fixed the tragedies of the living. But there are still those who were lost before I could reach them. Those who deserve to see what we've built. The garden went quiet. Kagaya, who had been standing by a flowering cherry tree, turned her head. Her presence was no longer cold, it was like the deep, silent pull of the tide. You speak of the great souls, Kagaya said. The ones whose deaths anchored the old world to its sorrow. I speak of my parents, Naruto said, standing up. I speak of Jiraiya. I speak of the Uchiha who never wanted the coup. If I am the king of time, then I should be able to offer them a place in this paradise. Conan stepped forward from the shadows of the veranda. To bring back the dead is a dangerous path, Naruto. Even with your power, the balance of the Pure Land is delicate. I'm not bringing back ghosts to fight a war, Conan, Naruto replied. I'm offering them a choice. You, sing the outer path and the sovereign's restoration. I can create vessels of pure light. They won't be Edo Tensei. They will be alive. Naruto walked to the center of the garden, where a massive white lotus floated in a pool of golden chakra. He closed his eyes, his Rinne Sharingan spinning with an intensity that made the air vibrate. Sage art. Call of the ancestral heart. He reached his hand into the air, and it was as if he were reaching through the very fabric of the afterlife. He searched for the golden light of Minato Namikaze and the fiery spirit of Kushina Uzumaki. He searched for the boisterous, curvy laughter of Jiraiya. One by one, silhouettes of golden light began to form around the lotus. The first to solidify was a tall man with spiky blonde hair and a kind smile, beside a woman with long, vibrant red hair. Minato and Kushina blinked, looking around the garden in confusion. Their eyes landed on Naruto, not the infant they had died to protect, but the man, the sovereign, the king. Naruto, Kushina whispered, her voice trembling. Hey, Mom. Hey, Dad, Naruto said, his voice thick with emotion. Welcome to the world you bought with your lives. It's finally ready for you. Kushina didn't wait. She lunged forward, pulling Naruto into a hug that could have cracked ribs, her tears wetting his royal cloak. Minato followed, placing a proud hand on his son's shoulder, his blue eyes taking in the peace of the palace. Next to emerge was Jiraiya. The Toad Sage looked around, saw the beautiful women of the vanguard, and let out a long, low whistle. Well, brat, I always knew you'd be a legend. But a king with a harem of the world's most powerful kunoichi. You've surpassed your master in every possible way. Naruto laughed, the sound breaking the tension. I had a good teacher, curvy sage. The final light to manifest was smaller, more reserved. Shisui Uchiha stood there, looking at the peaceful Konoha beyond the walls. He saw Sasuke, who was now a high-ranking commander of the Sovereign Guard, walking through the village with a look of contentment. The Uchiha, Shisui started, are safe, Shisui, Naruto said. They are part of the Foundation now. No more secrets, no more massacres. The garden became a place of reunion. The tragedies of the past were not just erased, they were healed. Naruto stood back, watching his parents talk to Hinata, watching Jiraiya try and fail to flirt with Mei, and watching the Uchiha brothers reunite in the distance. He felt a hand slide into his. It was Kagaya. She looked at the scene with a sense of wonder. You have done it. You have turned the cycle of reincarnation into a circle of love. It's just the beginning, Naruto said. Tomorrow, we start teaching the world how to maintain this. But for tonight, we're just a family. As the stars came out, the palace of the sovereign glowed like a beacon of hope. The king had not just saved the future, he had redeemed the past. End of Chapter 13. Chapter 14. The Convergence of Realities. The restoration of the Great Souls had solidified Naruto's reign as something beyond mere politics. He was now regarded as the bridge between heavens and earth. However, the fabric of time was not a silent victim of Naruto's rewrite. Deep within the rift where Naruto had first performed the Jikengyukuden, a fracture began to groan. The universe, seeking balance for the tragedies erased, attempted to pull the original timeline, the one of ash and ruin, back into existence. Naruto felt it first, a sudden, sharp chill in his marrow. He was sitting in the high observatory with Kagaya and Hinata, watching the twin moons, when the stars themselves seemed to flicker like a dying candle. The resonance is failing, Kagaya whispered, her Byakugan widening. Naruto, the timeline you abandoned. It is not gone. It is a ghost trying to reclaim its body. I felt it too, Naruto said, his Rinne Sharingan spinning with frantic precision. The tragedy is trying to reassert itself. If I don't anchor this reality now, everything we've built, the peace, the unions, the lives restored, will vanish like a dream upon waking. The sky over the sovereign palace turned a haunting shade of obsidian. In the center of the village plaza, a tear in reality appeared. From it stepped a shadow. It was Naruto, but not the sovereign. This was a version of Naruto that had failed, a gaunt, hollow-eyed wraith draped in a tattered orange cloak, his body radiating the pure, unadulterated grief of the world that ended. The shadow Naruto looked at the vibrant, peaceful Konoha with a mixture of envy and hatred. Why? The wraith rasped, its voice a chorus of the dead. Why do you get to be happy while we burned? This world is a lie built on the bones of a trillion tears. The vanguard mobilized instantly. Mei, Yugito, Tamari, and Konan surrounded the rift, but their attacks, lava, blue fire, wind, and paper, simply passed through the wraith. It wasn't a physical being, it was a temporal echo. Naruto descended from the palace, his golden cloak burning with the intensity of a star. Because I chose to change, Shadow. I am not ignoring your pain, I am ending the cycle that created you. You cannot erase us, the shadow screamed. Behind it, the faces of the fallen, the Neji who died on the battlefield, the Hinata who was struck down by pain, the Jiraiya who sank into the dark sea, manifested as screaming spirits. Naruto didn't draw a blade. He didn't use a destructive jutsu. He walked directly into the center of the dark aura. I know your weight, Naruto said softly. He reached out and placed his hands on the shadow's shoulders. I carried you for a lifetime. But a king doesn't just rule his people, he rules his own shadows. Naruto activated the final stage of the sovereign's restoration, total synthesis. He began to absorb the darkness. He didn't push the bad timeline away, he integrated it. He took the grief, the loss, and the memories of the Ash were LD and transformed them into the wisdom of the new era. The pressure was immense. The ground cracked, and the sky bled gold. Naruto's wives and companions watched in terror as his form flickered bedway. And the Golden King and the tattered wraith. Naruto-kun, Hinata cried out, her chakra flaring to support him. Stay back, Naruto commanded, his teeth gritted. I have to be the one to carry this. This is the price of the throne. With a final, titanic roar of chakra, Naruto slammed his palms together. 6 paths. Eternal reconciliation. A dome of white light erupted, covering the entire continent. Within that light, the ghosts of the old world didn't scream, they smiled. They saw the world Naruto had created, and they gave their permission to let the past go. The shadow Naruto looked into the sovereign's eyes, saw the love of the women surrounding him, and finally dissolved into a shower of golden petals. The sky cleared. The stars returned, brighter than before. Naruto fell to one knee, panting. His golden cloak was gone, replaced by a simple white robe. He felt heavier, older in spirit, but the fracture was healed. The two timelines had merged. The original was now nothing more than a memory, a lesson to ensure the new would never fall. Kagaya and Hinata were at his side in an instant, their hands glowing with healing light. It's done, Naruto whispered, looking at the women who were his world. The past can't hurt us anymore. The universe has accepted this reality as the only one. Mei leaned down and kissed his brow. You saved us again, my king. Even from yourself. Naruto smiled and looked toward the horizon. Only one thing remained. The legacy. The world was saved, the women were loved, and the tragedies were dead. It was time to look toward the final horizon, the legacy of the Uzumaki sovereignty. End of Chapter 14. Chapter 15. The Zenith of the Eternal Sun. The scars of time had finally closed, leaving behind a world that felt less like a collection of nations and more like a living, breathing organism of peace. Years had passed since the Great Reconciliation. The sovereign union had expanded beyond the elemental nations, reaching into the distant lands across the sea, spreading the philosophy of the Golden King. Naruto sat upon the balcony of the high spire, his gaze sweeping over the sprawling metropolis of Neo-Konoha. The village was no longer a hidden fortress, it was a city of light, where the tech of the future met the spiritual mastery of the past. Airships powered by wind chakra hummed in the sky, and gardens of bioluminescent flora, a gift from the moon, glowed in the twilight. He was older now, though the 6 paths chakra kept him in the physical prime of his life. His hair was longer, tied back in a style reminiscent of his father. and his presence had mellowed from a roaring sun into a steady, warming hearth. "The children are asleep," a voice said softly. Naruto turned to see Hinata and Hanabi walking toward him. Hanabi, who had become the Grand General of the Sovereign Guard, looked at her brother-in-law with undying respect. Hinata, the High Queen, looked at him with the same love she had held as a shy girl behind a tree. "And the others?" Naruto asked. "Kagaya is meditating at the World Tree. She says the planet's heartbeat is finally rhythmic," Hinata replied, leaning against his side. "Mei and Tamari are finalizing the trade pacts with the Southern Isles, and Yugito is training the new generation of Jinchuriki, though they call themselves Guardians now." Naruto smiled. The word Jinchuriki had been retired. The Biju were no longer sealed in cages. They were partners who lived within their hosts by choice, acting as the ultimate deterrent against any who would dream of reviving the old ways of war. "I was thinking about the beginning," Naruto murmured. "The bridge in the mist. The blood in the sand. It feels like 1,000 years ago, yet I remember the smell of the salt air like it was yesterday." "You did it, Naruto," Hanabi said, looking out at the city. "You fixed it all. There hasn't been a shinobi casualty in a decade. No orphans. No broken families." As the moons rose, now 3 of them, a celestial alignment Naruto had created to stabilize the Earth's tides, the vanguard gathered on the balcony. Conan brought a bouquet of paper flowers that never wilted. Karen brought a report of the global chakra health, which was at its historical peak. Even Orochimaru and Kabuto, now the directors of the Imperial Research Institute, sent a message of gratitude from the depths of their labs. Naruto stood up and walked to the edge of the spire. He looked at the women who had stood by him: Hinata, Mei, Tamari, Conan, Yugito, Karen, and Kagaya. They were the queens of his heart, the architects of his peace. In this life, he had not just saved the world, he had cherished it. "It's a good view," Kit, Kurama's voice echoed, more peaceful than ever. "The best we've ever had." "Yeah," Naruto thought, "the best." He reached out and took Hinata's hand, and then Mei's. The threads of fate were now a golden tapestry that draped over the entire world, invisible to most, but felt by every soul as a sense of security and belonging. "The era of tragedy is over," Naruto declared to the silent night. "The era of the sovereign is eternal." He leaned back, surrounded by the laughter and warmth of the women he loved. Watching the stars he had tamed. The boy who had nothing had become the man who had everything. The king who had traveled through time had finally found his home. As the light of the 3 moons converged on the palace, the world slept in perfect peace, guarded by the king who had refused to let destiny have the last word. End of chapter 15. And so, this chapter of the shinobi world comes to an end, but the legend does not. Naruto Uzumaki didn't just change the future, he erased the need for fear itself. Villages once divided now stand as one. Enemies became allies, and a world built on hatred finally learned peace. The eternal Harem King did not rule through domination, but through bonds, bonds strong enough to bend destiny, time, and even the gods themselves. His story is no longer written in scrolls or carved into stone, it lives in every heartbeat of the new world he created. But remember, every legend has many paths, and somewhere beyond time, another story is already waiting to be told. If you enjoyed this what-if journey, stay connected with Will of Fire stories. Because as long as the will burns, the story never truly ends.